Greetings, my excellent friend.
Welcome to Most Excellent Adventure to
Heavy Metal
History.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Heavy Metal History Podcast, I'm your host, Dustin, and for this episode, I have Ryan and Jesse, guitarist and vocalist from the band Misery Signals. Guys, thank you for doing the podcast today.
Yeah, man, thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So today, the reason I brought you guys on here, we're going to be talking about the 15th anniversary of your guys' first album of Malice and the Magnum Heart. Yeah, so that's kind of the goal here, is we're going to talk about kind of how this record got made. But I think even before that, you know, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of have to get into that happened even before the record was made, because it took a couple years to kind of get up to it. And I guess if we want to start off, the thing that I would like to know, obviously, you know, you can read this on Wikipedia or anywhere on the internet, but this band was made out of about 2 or 3 different bands from the scene, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So from my half, I was in a band called Seven Angels, Seven Plagues, and Jesse was joining that band sort of towards the end of it. But all of that came out of Jesse's band disbanding as well, and him kind of finding a new home with us. So, yeah, definitely it always is the fragments of other bands that came together to be this.
Which is cool because I think that's how a lot of scenes thrive, even to this day, is, you know, kind of like, you know, hey, our band's not working out, why don't you come over and join us? And then, you know, you kind of get something better out of it in some ways. You know, iron sharpens iron in some respects. And I think, you know, Seven Angels, Seven Plagues is just as, like, well known as Misery Signals in a lot of ways to this very day, I feel like, too.
Yeah, maybe.
For sure.
So the beginning days of the band, it was Ryan, Jesse, and your brother on drums, correct?
Yes, yeah, and Kyle was in the big band from the very beginning as well.
Okay,
plays bass.
Cool. And then you later added Stu on second guitar, right?
Yeah, correct. Stu came into the band when we were only a few months in. Our original guitarist Jeff could only maintain on tour with us for a short time, and after he left, Stu joined. But it was still pretty early in the band, so we've had kind of that same core group for a long time.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you guys, for the most part, have had a pretty solid lineup for I mean, I guess pretty much 15 years, I would say, minus Carl coming in for a couple albums there, and now everything's kind of gone back to the original lineup at this point, I would say, correct?
Yes, correct.
Let's see. Where do I want to start with this? This is always the hard part, is like starting. Okay, so you guys are all in separate bands. You're kind of making something new happen. Where does the writing process start of Malice and the Magnum Heart?
That's a good question.
I know it's 15 years. It's a lot to remember.
Sorry, say again?
I was saying it's been 15 years, so I know it's a lot to kind of like jog from that point in time, but you know,
for sure.
I believe in you guys. I believe in what we're gonna do here.
So when I joined Seven Angels, I moved down from Edmonton to Milwaukee, and for a period of time I stayed with Jared, and then I stayed with Ryan. When Misery Signals when Seven Angels disbanded, right away we just had the plan that we would start Misery Signals up. So I was at that point living with Ryan, and we wrote the EP basically living there at Ryan's house in Madison, Wisconsin. At that point, Jeff Ost was the second guitar player. Jeff came and basically lived with us at Ryan's house for about, 2 months. We wrote music every single day. That's all we did was just play music and write music. So that EP came together very, very fast. One of those songs, The Year Summer Ended in June, would also end up on Of Malice and the Magnum Heart. So as soon as we released that EP, we toured a whole bunch. And as Ryan said, Jeffrey left shortly thereafter. I came back to Edmonton and started, I guess, grooming Stu Ross to join the band. And during that point, Ryan was definitely still writing at home with Brandon. And during that point, they wrote the song called Murder. And so that song was written entirely, I believe, by the brothers, just completely on their own. And by the time Stuart and I came back down to, again, reconvene in Madison, we had Summer, we had Murder, and then it was just to continue on writing. So once Seven Angels stopped, we were just full steam ahead with Misery Signals, and we wrote the EP, and Ryan continued writing. I don't think there was ever a point where we weren't writing music in that first couple of years as a band.
So how old were you guys around this time?
Man, I would have been 21 when the band started.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was older, so I was 23, 24.
So tons of just like pure angst, I guess, just in some respects, and just like, you know, a lot of creativity really just flowing from you guys. Not that it's ever stopped, but you know, I always hear the same thing from a lot of bands, that, you know, you spend your whole life writing your first album, and I feel like for this first album to come out from you guys, I feel like that really, really rings true.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just posted on Instagram the other day, like, and Brandon, our Instagram guy or whatever, reposted it, a poem that Jordan, the guitar player from Compromise, gave me. And there's parts from that poem that Jordan wrote in 2000, you know, that I teased parts out of that. The title itself of Malice and the Magnum Heart comes from that. So, yeah, wow. There's that first record for sure. You can pull from all sorts of stuff that you've written, you know, in your teens and early 20s or whatever.
So I know the biggest thing, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this like ad nauseum over your career, but the biggest thing that kind of went into a lot of, or at least the very least, you know, the summer ended in June is that car or van wreck with members of Compromise, and you know, kind of putting that into a song and in music, and you know, creating a piece of art out of that horrible, horrible tragedy that nobody that's ever toured wants to ever deal with. And I think, you know, it kind of carries this weight over a lot of the album that for some reason I think a lot of people can relate to. They just kind of relate to it in different ways in their life. Have you guys kind of dealt with that over the years with people listening to that song?
Yeah, I think that The Year Summer Ended in June is something that resonates with lots of people, and if it's definitely a song that I've spoken with and spoken with a lot of people about, and received lots of emails about, and lots of messages about. It's that something that everyone can relate to, right? That idea of loss, of a great loss.
Yeah, and I think too, if you know, speaking about, you know, people having questions about that song or about the record, like we sort of explored this publicly because we did a 10-year anniversary for the album, and when we were doing that 10-year anniversary, that was kind of the time that Jesse came back in the fold and regrouped with us, and we ended up filming all that. And it wasn't really the plan to do so at the time, but we filmed it all, and it ended up becoming this documentary that we put out, and it's called Yesterday Was Everything. And if you know, you're interested in the band and you haven't checked it out, anyone that's listening to this, maybe take a moment to find it, because the guy filming it did a pretty good job exploring the backstory and a lot of people that were involved, you know, with Compromise, Jesse's earlier band, and that van wreck, and really the early parts of the band and everything that went into the album of Malice and the Magnum Heart. Like, we take a pretty close look at that, and there's a lot of like candid interviews and like good info, and you know, just kind of history of the band that people can look for more if they're listening to this, would probably be interested in anyways. Yeah,
which is like, I'm trying to stray away from a lot of stuff that was covered in that documentary, because I know it's out there and people can see it. just from like my perspective, but I know at the same time, like, because it has already been spoken about, like I'm bound to like tread over the same ground that was covered in it. But
yeah, I think that's fine too. Like, I'm happy to kind of point people back to that because like I really like how it turned out. And
yeah. I'm really glad you guys did it too, because like even for, you know, it's been 5 more years since that happened, and you know I think it's one of those albums that's always going to stand the test of time. And, you know, having that documentary there, you know, people really, really resonate with this record in the metal scene. I mean, I don't know. I know for me, I was a lot younger when it came out, but I mean, for you guys, like, what was that initial reception when it kind of came out? Because I know the world was a different place. There wasn't a lot of internet really around then. Like, do you guys kind of remember what it was like when it kind of dropped?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it coming out and us just, you know, already being on tour, and it felt important to us because, you know, it was our kind of debut record on a label, and it felt like a big deal for us. But I don't think we had the perception that it was like a smash success at the time. You know, we were still kind of a budding band, and, you know, still to an extent struggling, you know, out there touring a ton and being relatively unknown. So it's taken a lot of time for that to sort of feel like something that, you know, I appreciate you calling it timeless. It's very kind. But, you know, it took some time for us to, like, I think, get the idea that it was going to stick with people, you know, because we did have some enthusiasm early on, but it was a pretty small group of people that knew about the band to begin with. And I think it took quite a while for it to grow. So it didn't seem like an ultimate home run at the moment that it happened, right? We were proud of it, obviously, musically and like with what was happening, but it was, as far as it like resonating with people, like it's hard to say when we first got sense of that, but it wasn't right out the gates.
I can see that, because 2004 was a very weird time in music, because like obviously metalcore was kind of blowing up, but also deathcore and like stuff like that was blowing up right after it. And so like melodic stuff, like what you guys were doing, wasn't really, I guess, the big draw, I would assume, around that point in time. And, you know, I mean, even to be fair, like I saw you guys in, I don't know, probably 2006, and you were playing like sold out rooms, you know, in Atlanta, like whatever, like Tabernacle or whatever the bigger venues are there. But like you guys are playing sold out shows for sure, and that was in 2006, and that was kind of before like the internet came around and like flooded everything, so to speak, with music. But I know a lot of people that I talk to, or, you know, that listen to this podcast, like, of Malice comes up quite a bit in terms of records that, like, oh my god, I fucking love this album so much. But I think you have something there where you were saying like it wasn't an initial kind of thing. It just took people time. Like, it just took time over the years for people to come around and like really appreciate that record or the band in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, I was dealing with a lot of tragedy at that time, and a lot of those things that we wrote about are, you know, there's very universal themes on that record that people can relate to. So early on, I mean, you could see that the year Summer Ended in June, that people could connect to that and that people were singing along with that, you know. Mm-hmm. The first year that we played Hellfest compared to the second year that we played Hellfest, which would have been just after Malice was released, was a huge, huge difference, you know. And like I said, we were just touring so much at that time. So it was, for us, to be within the machine or whatever, it was, I mean, you couldn't see it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like, you know, the scene around that time, I mean, because like I'm trying to think, because like I got super involved with stuff around like 2008. Not that I wasn't already listening to heavy metal, but like my own personal involvement with like the metal scene. And man, I always like go back and watch older videos. Are you talking about Hellfest, like when it was in Massachusetts, or like that area?
No,
or like
Syracuse. It was like
okay.
Those two, yeah, would be, yeah, Syracuse.
Yeah, because I know there's that Hellfest it's in like France or somewhere now.
Oh yeah, that's a totally different thing. So
Yeah.
in the early 2000s, there was a big festival in New York that was happened in the summertime. There was a big, very important hardcore and metalcore festival.
Okay, so that's like the one that like Red Chord played and like a bunch of
yes,
those.
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Damn, man, I hate that I was so young during that time. Although I say that I was like 15. That's not terribly young, but I guess that's young enough.
No, those were very, very special festivals. Very, very cool.
So, Jesse, you were kind of talking about the writing process and how, Ryan and everybody would just like, you guys would be constantly just writing music during that point in time after the EP. When you guys kind of came to the point where you had everything ready to go and you were starting to record, what did that look like going into it?
A very exciting time for us all. For me, being a young Canadian metal kid, to be able to finally work with Devin Townsend was just this dream come true. For me to be creating music with these, with Ryan and Kyle, who just, a couple years previous had been like, kind of like heroes of mine. It was just an amazing thing for this young Canadian kid to be experiencing that. So, I just complete excitement and, just be very excited, very happy to be doing what we were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely felt like too, that we were sort of leveling up our commitment to it, because that was around the time that I left college and stopped, got rid of the house there that I was renting with friends, and like moved out and just kind of put my stuff in storage and just really went for it, like kind of put everything else on hold, and that's like because I was making records with Seven Angels and doing tours here and there before, but this was kind of the time that we just put the foot on the gas and just didn't look back really, and like that's the beginning of that time for me, is like getting ready to do Malice, and I remember also like just before the recording, we spent the winter in Edmonton, where Jesse's from, and I was just sleeping on the floor and we were just demoing songs and writing and doing it every day. So it was like kind of this transition period from like other things going on to just like everything else is on the back burner and we're doing the band.
Just music. Yeah.
It's got to be a great feeling kind of looking back on it too, just knowing how completely enraptured you guys were in the making of this record, I'm sure like during the time of it was super stressful and you guys were just like, fuck man, I can't believe we're about to make a record. Like what's going to come of it? And now, here we are 15 years later and you're on a podcast talking about it. And I'm sure it's just like, man, it was so much fun.
Yeah, totally.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge to get 2 or 3 people like, headed in the same direction. And for a period, us 5 were very much just headed in that same direction and just pushing so hard, and it's hard to come by. So we were very lucky to have that for a period of time when we were young and we were able to just commit so much time to our art, right?
Yeah, I think that's how some of the greatest art is made. Just youthful exuberance, man. That's where it all comes from, for the most part. I'm not saying you guys still can't make art to this day. I'm sure we're all around the same age here now, like in our 30s and stuff like that. But, you guys are still cranking out records. You're working on a new record right now, right?
Yeah,
yes,
we're working on new songs. Probably
Nice.
Won't give a ton of details right now.
No,
we're not ready for that. But
totally fine.
but yeah, there is new stuff.
So one thing, Ryan, I want to kind of touch on real quick with you is your guitar playing style, man. In most respects, I would say personally, just from like listening to all the stuff you've played in, I would say from Seven Angels, Seven Plagues to Misery Signals, your style is the same, but it's also different. I feel like there's a whole lot more melody in Misery Signals than there was in Seven Angels, Seven Plagues. Where did you kind of decide to go more melodic with Misery Signals?
That's always been something that I've been interested in. Even like getting into guitar playing, like when I was young, it was like because of Metallica, you know, and I was always like pretty fascinated with even just like, you know, Ride the Lightning, just having super pretty, clean, beautiful stuff in it, and super heavy, thrashy guitar. So like that was part of my interest from the beginning, and like always in writing, especially I guess in Seven Angels, I started just messing more with things that were as heavy and as pretty as possible, and like those not being opposing sides of a spectrum, but you could do them together, and like that was kind of like something that interested me a lot, and that I ended up being somewhat good at. So that's always been a theme that I'm excited to look at, and that's one of the main things I think about when I think about Misery Signals, is like that seeming dichotomy being like not a spectrum, but just like something that can work together. And like when that works and bands do that, like that's one of my favorite things. So yeah, that's totally accurate of you to point out.
I agree with you. I think a lot of Swedish bands like kind of do that well, but it's a lot different to the way we, like, I guess we do it here in America, so to speak. But I think that we kind of do, like, we distill a lot of things to our own advantages as far as like music goes, but we've got a lot of really good stuff out of it. And I think if you look at the way that we infused hardcore with melody, which kind of does come from, you know, not just Metallica. I definitely think Metallica are a huge part of that, but I think a lot of Swedish bands too. It does create such a good juxtaposition of sound, you know, because you have this aggressive kind of like thrashy guitar parts, but man, when those melodies kick in, it's just so nice to kind of have that like coalesce of sound there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love it, man.
So with this album specifically, when you guys are ready to record, was everything ready to go, like all written, like you were going to go in the studio and bang it out? Is that pretty much what it was like?
We were super prepared. We had demoed almost every song. I think there's like In Response to Stars, the second song on the record, was the last one to come together. And the one with the clean singing on the end. What is it, Ryan?
The Difference of Vengeance and Wrongs. Yeah, Difference of Vengeance and Wrongs.
Those two songs were the last to come together. So I think that I remember, especially In Response to Stars, the chorus, that coming together. Like I had never sung that prior to recording it, like with the band or anything. So, but most everything was really prepared prior to going to Vancouver. Okay.
So you guys have everything ready to go. It's all written, and now you're going into the studio. So you mentioned working with Devin Townsend. Like, was that your choice from the outset, or did it kind of happen by accident that you were going to work with Devin?
As I said, just growing up here, like I was always a big fan of Strapping and Ocean Machine and stuff. So
yeah,
I really wanted to do something with him, and when I reached out, he just agreed to do it. So yeah, from pretty early on, his name was right at the forefront. I think Ryan might be able to recall maybe other people we were considering at that time, but for me, Devin was definitely my choice right from the get-go.
Yeah, we may have bounced a couple of names around, but that was the only one that we ever were excited about and like pursuing, and it just so happened to the stars aligned for it. So, yeah, we were stoked to make that happen for sure.
Yeah, Devin has such an incredible ear for music and, you know, melody too, that I really felt like it's such a good fit to have him do something on the record, you know, like producing it and everything and recording it with him. I mean, it's one thing, like I mentioned earlier, where iron sharpens iron. So I'm sure, like, working with him, you guys probably picked up a lot of stuff in the studio that you carried on throughout the years from working with him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been an inspiration to me my whole life, for sure.
And yeah, it was pretty intimidating too, because he's just like such an excellent guitarist that I was like, oh man, I gotta not blow it for this guy right now. So I just really wanted to bring my A game and not let him down as a guy that like played guitar for Steve Vai and shit like that. Like, and it's just a virtuoso. It's like, so having him like coach your guitar playing is like, it's pretty cool, but it's also a little scary.
Did you still have the skullet? Was this still the skullet years?
Yes.
Oh shit.
And yeah, something else while we're talking about Devin too, to think about, and it just kind of occurs to me now, because of the way we're looking back on Malice, but it's like he had he has his own like peculiar style to producing too. So I think the mix and the assembly of that record sounds strange, but in the context of like all the other kind of bands that were similar to Misery Signals and on the same label, or like of the same like pedigree as us, like nothing really sounded quite like that at the time. So it was able to stand out a little bit just because of the kind of like quirky way that I think Devin's mind works as the producer. Mm-hmm. And it definitely put like an interesting and like kind of unique flavor on that record. His touches for sure. So I think it would have been easier to overlook the album if it did sound, you know, if it was recorded by someone who was recording all the other bands that were putting things out at the same time. So that's definitely worth noting for sure.
Yeah, he was a super, super important part of that record, and truly produced us as a band.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the way the record sounds, because I listened to a lot of music since then and even around that time, but there's not very much that sounds like that record, especially like the guitar tone. I mean, the way the vocals come across, the drums, nothing sounds like that record. It's hard to compare it to anything else, and I think that's, you know, why I said earlier it kind of stands the test of time too, because it doesn't sound like anything else at all.
Right. It wasn't trying to be anything else sonically, you know what I mean? And I think some of the stuff that, you know, Devin chose to do maybe even was like kind of reckless or ill-advised, but we just had that sort of spirit with it. We're just like, we're just going to chase it and just let it be what it is. And, you know, some of that stuff might be just like looked at by some other mixers like, well, this is a mistake or this is wrong technically, you know, and like this could be better and cleaned up or tightened or whatever. But, we just went for it.
So do you happen to remember what kind of gear you were using or like guitars you were playing as far as like live and studio with the record?
Yeah, man. I mean, how deep do you want to go into that question?
I love hearing about gear. That's why I asked that question.
Yeah, well, so we recorded the drums at this place that at the time was called the Greenhouse. You know, and I was like really psyched on it because you can see some of that studio in like A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica, documentary.
Shit.
And just like a bunch of famous shit has been recorded there. Like I remember talking about all the like Madonna records and stuff that were mixed on the console that we were using when we were cutting drums. Cause it's just this like giant like Neve console that's in that room that's been around forever. But as far as guitars and stuff, we were using some of Devin's, but we were using our own as well. And I know, I'm not sure which guitar heads we used in the actual recording. We ended up reamping a few things, but we definitely used a 5150 for one of the sides of the guitar. And we definitely used a few different like ESP guitars that we were playing at the time, who we had kind of like a sponsorship deal with. Yeah. And then used a Paul Reed Smith that Devin had for a bunch of the clean stuff.
Yeah, those cleans on that record, especially like when there's a lot of parts on that record where it's, you know, it's all the overdriven stuff and it just transitions so smoothly to those cleans, man. I mean, you would not know that it transitioned if you weren't just like really, really listening to it. And I mean, it's fantastic the way it just goes from the overdriven to the clean on all your records even too. Like you guys have a really good way of like transitioning those parts.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff kind of falls under that same category of us like that kind of shouldn't work the way that it ended up working, particularly on that album. Like it's kind of maybe reckless and like sort of overly optimistic to just hope that those kind of transitions, just like sudden ones or ones that just like switch in tone and timbre super hard, just happen out of nowhere, and it's fine and no one questions it. But somehow it just, because of the amount we did that and like the way that record feels, like it just works. So I think some of that's luck and some of it's just like, you know, youthful abandon of like conventions and just not caring.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, man, like, you know, when you're really trying to make a piece of art like this, you know, I assume you guys like weren't really overthinking things too much. It was just like, yeah, we're going to do this. Like, let's do this. And, you know, there wasn't like a bunch of nitpicking over certain song structures or maybe sounds of the record. It was just like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that, you know?
Yeah.
So with like being with Devin and recording it, how many days or weeks did you guys have as far as recording, and how did you split that up between everything?
If I recall correctly, I think that we were in Greenhouse for 2 weeks. Is that correct, Ryan?
It kind of blurs together for me with the recording of a controller, so
Sure.
I'm not sure which one was which, but 2 weeks in Greenhouse, but we also went to like kind of a supplemental studio space to record some vocals and overdubs and stuff.
Okay.
So that was another, you know, certainly a couple weeks, so maybe a month in total, right, Jesse?
I think it's less, buddy. I think we were in that big room for only maybe a week, and then the other stuff was maybe a week, maybe two. But
yeah,
that's a long time ago, so I'm not certain.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, like, you know, because I mean, at this point too, you guys have recorded so many more records that like trying to remember every little detail like that is just like, well, I mean, maybe it was this record, who knows?
Yeah, and then having gone back to Devin in 2008, not with Jesse but with Carl, you know, we spent another month with him there. I think that one was closer to a month, but yeah, it blurs together a bit because a lot of it was even in the same facility. So
it makes sense, right? Because Controller, you guys were further along, you would have had more of a budget, so you probably would have spent longer on it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was something I was really curious about. You know, if you don't want to talk about specifics, but as far as like budgetary things and the technology of recording at the time, what was it like in 2004? Because I know things have advanced so far since then. I know like Pro Tools was still kind of a newer thing around then. I know it was being like utilized in some studios, but like, what was the technology like for you guys recording, and then like budgetary things around that time?
We were on Pro Tools 6. Devin has, you know, I think was a pretty early adopter of Pro Tools. But I don't think we recorded anything to tape, like drums or anything. I think we were going straight to digital from the get-go.
Yeah, I think so.
And that was kind of when I got interested in recording, was like just seeing all that stuff happen with him for the first time. Yeah, I mean, it was cool. We were kind of jumping, like I said, back and forth between like a sort of rehearsal space, like project studio, and like a world-class, like giant, amazing, expensive studio.
Wow.
But it was the first time that I had ever worked on anything where I had a record label advance paying for it.
Yeah.
So I didn't go into my pocket for the recording for anything. You know, none of us did. I think we had like, you know, like small per diems for the band to just like live while we were staying there. We were sleeping on the floor at the studio, so it's not like we were in some like high budget hotel like laughing, you know. But we were, you know, it was certainly more money than we had to work with. Ever. And compared to, I think, record label budgets now, it would seem like a lot. I think something around like 20 grand was the budget for the whole record.
Okay. Yeah, they've definitely dropped quite significantly over the years, that's for sure.
Well, and I mean, the cost of recording is a little different too, because
True.
So much of it can be done in just various spaces, and there's just like a lot of cheap options for digital recording. So I totally get it. And plus, you know, the industry can't necessarily support huge budgets in the same way it might have been able to like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, that's one of the things when I read about like a record that costs like $1 million, you know, for like a recording budget, and I'm just like, man, it doesn't sound like $1 million. Like, where the fuck did that all go?
Cocaine.
Yeah, you're definitely not wrong. But yeah, I think that's been one of the greatest things that I've seen over the years with like the advent of technology, and you know, not only that, but crowdfunding, which you guys utilized to such a great degree with your last album, getting it made and recorded, and the merch and literally everything to do with the record release. You guys kind of did on your own, and I think that's such a cool thing to see happen these days, because I mean, you know, where would the band be if that wasn't a thing that you could utilize?
Yeah, I mean, we'd probably be stuck on Warner Brothers, because the Ferret Records, the label that we were on, got absorbed by Warner Brothers, and we were kind of on a weird shelf with them where they didn't really care about us. So yeah, it definitely would have been a weird situation, and like our crowdfunding experience was awesome, and everyone came through for us, so that was a good time.
So Jesse, I want to touch with you real quick, man, about like a lot of your writing process and vocal experiences with this record, you know, because you know, when you say everybody was kind of writing stuff, what were you doing like lyrically as far as the record to kind of like coincide with everything that they were writing?
I mean, the band that I played in previously to Misery Signals Compromise was also quite a serious band for a couple years before I joined Misery Signals. So, I mean, like probably most singers, I was constantly writing. You know, I was always writing poems and writing things down. So I always had things that I wanted to use or that I could use for the new song or whatever we were working on.
So with as far as like when they would have something finished music wise, would you put your lyrics to it after they were done with it musically, or would you guys kind of work together bit by bit to kind of piece together a song?
Yeah, you know, with metal, I mean, with this kind of metal, so often, you know, the music is written and then you put lyrics over top of that. With the newest stuff that we've been writing, we've been more conscious, I guess, of not just doing that. But for surely with Malice and with Compromise and stuff, the band that I was in prior, it was that, you know, you kind of took the finished pieces that you were given and took whatever lyrics or poems you had and fit them in over top. There was not a lot of writing around maybe melodies that I had come up with, you know, or even patterns or whatever. So yeah, mostly finished pieces of music I would be given, and I would fit words that I had into those pieces. As I said, because we were so focused on the group at that time, you know, just as new pieces came up, I just kind of tried to finish them off, and it was kind of like just in that order, right? As Ryan and Stuart and as the guys finished pieces, I would just do my bit to finish them off.
Yeah, and it's also was cool that we were sort of traveling none of us like were really at a home base and then meeting up. We were all kind of just moving as a unit to different places and staying together for the most part. So we would rehearse and we would have all five of us there, you know. So Jesse would be in the room or in the next room and dropping in and out, and, you know, we'd be communicating about the parts. And like, I think that's that became more unusual for us later on, but during that record, you know, everyone was there for it, you know. So there was, you know, communication of kind of like ideas and feelings and energy. It wasn't like, you know, Jesse was an outsider and we mailed him a CD of like, hey, we're done with all these songs. Like, we were all like just in the trenches with that record and working on it, like, and present, you know. And that's a cool way to write, because I think I can't speak for everyone, but it seems like, you know, I do some recording and producing for bands and stuff, and it's like, doesn't often work that way, man. You know, more often it's one person or a couple people kind of doing things and then showing the rest of the band what's going on, you know what I mean? And like we had for Malice a really organic and group, effort happening.
Yeah, we were super, as I said, super focused and super blessed to just be able to have that time together. And whether it was in Edmonton or in Madison, generally it was us five together just in a basement writing. And we were fortunate to be able to spend that amount of time putting things together.
Yeah, I mean, man, just like listening to this, the way you guys are talking about it, I mean, it's, I'm trying to put myself in that room or rooms, when you guys are like trying to like bounce ideas back and forth. And I can only imagine some of the stuff that was either written or, like you guys goofing around with stuff. And, it's such a cool thing to like hear these stories of how something's being made, in steps and in the journey of it. And I think that's one of the incredible things about music, because it's not just the music itself, it's the lyrics, it's the words, how it's sung, how the melodies are, and it just all comes together into this one thing. And I think that's one of the great things, especially about melodic music, is it really, I think it just helps resonate a lot more with people.
Yeah, for sure, man. That actually jogs my memory of like this kind of changes course of what you're saying a little bit, but
sure.
I was gonna give you guys like kind of a little behind the music tidbit from the studio recording, since we're thinking about just this record and like specifics of it, and you're saying looking at the depth of it and like kind of all the details, but I'll paint a little picture for you. So we were at Greenhouse, the bigger studio, and we were recording drums, and we were all in the room playing together. Like the amps were obviously in ISO booths, so we could kind of just get takes of the drums. But they had put up like a canvas kind of tent, sound tent, sort of drum tent thing, so that they could capture the room mics in a certain way.
Okay.
Around the drummer. So there's this kind of like canvasy tent thing in the room. And Devin kind of like put the lights real low and like lit some candles in the live room. So we were just like vibing out, right?
Devy really liked to burn incense and have candles going.
Sounds very Devinish.
So we had some cool atmosphere, and like we're kind of playing through these songs and just like, trying to really capture it in the room. And during one of the takes, like the candle got knocked over or tipped over, just some vibrations and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And
some of the like either the it was like the cover for the tent or like the bag the tent came in just like fully caught on fire.
Whoa.
So there was just like a fire going on, and it could have gotten really bad, but like the guy that was engineering, his name's Sean, he like kicked the door open and had that like a 5-gallon drum of like, like a office water cooler, big water container, and he just kicked through the door carrying that thing like a baby and like just dumped it all over the burning tent, and saved the day. But it was an intense moment. And I remember we were making like a progress chart, so we had like all the names of the songs on the record up on this big like poster board thing. Mm-hmm. So we could mark off when we got all the drums finished and the bass finished, and we could just kind of see how the progress was going along and make sure we got everything done. And at the time, the songs didn't have names, not all of them. Some of them did. But so on the poster board, a lot of them were named just numbers, And I seem to remember on that poster board, because my brother saved it, like the progress chart from the album. That was song number 5 we were recording. Which may have ended up being 5 years, but on the poster board, the word 5 is crossed out, or that V is anyways, and it just says fire.
Now my question is, how much of that take was caught on the recording? Not on the real recording, but it's like, like a take that it exists somewhere.
It would be such a better story if that actually like made the record, but I'm sure we'd have stopped and had to do it over.
You know what's funny is I kind of have a story about Stu here.
Yeah.
I used to tour the band, and if I'm not mistaken, because my memory is also kind of hazy, this was like 10 years ago. He was either doing sound or guitar tech work for a band that we were on tour with, and literally the entire tour, people were hassling him about a new Misery Signals record, like every day. Like,
well, it could have been. I don't know if he was teching. He also plays in Comeback Kid, so it might have been just like Comeback Kid was playing.
No,
because he used to play in a band called Living with Lions as well, right after Misery Signals.
It was definitely some kind of tech job. The tour was Ghost Inside, Azalea Dying, Stick to Your Guns, Veil of Maya, and Unearth maybe, and then the band I was touring with, Carnifex, and he was like,
oh, cool,
a crew guy somewhere on there.
I'm betting it was Brandon. Brandon was drum teching for a while.
Maybe it was Brandon.
It could have been Brandon. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it was. It was one of you guys for sure. And like I seriously remember though, like everybody was hassling him about new Misery Signals like every fucking day, and he's like, "Yeah, we're getting to it, man. Like, don't worry, it's coming." I always thought that was funny though, because I was like, I didn't want to hassle him about it, but at the same time, I was just kind of like, so when's it coming, man? But also, like, I think Controller had just come out like maybe a year or two earlier, so it wasn't like that long of an amount of time had passed. But so yeah, getting back to Malice, kind of the last thing I want to touch on here real quick is, because when I like to think about everything that goes into a record, I think album covers are very important to a record. What did you guys who did you work with, and how did you decide on the album cover?
So at that time, Dev really took us under his wing, I suppose. Helped us a lot with the recording, and also put us in touch with that artist. That artist Dev had done stuff with previously. I think he did the Terria record, I think. And so Ryan might recall better, and might recall the guy's name. But I believe Dev put us in touch with that guy, and he just threw, I think, 4 or 5 images at us, and that one was definitely the one that stuck with us right off the bat.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm gonna blow it and not say the guy's name right, but I think his name is Scott.
Okay.
I'm kind of blanking on it right now, but
you did Scott very well.
Thank you. But yeah, no, that was definitely a nod that Dev pushed us in that direction, and he had done like some Opeth artwork and stuff like that around the same time, and that we thought was really cool, and kind of had the same thing where it was like it didn't really look quite like what else was going on with other bands that we saw around us, and we liked that, and we also liked kind of the sensitivity of his artwork, and felt like that it went along with what we wanted the album to be like. So it very much connected to a lot of the lyrical content, so it made good sense. His name is not Scott, it is Travis Smith. That's what it is. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I just pulled up the Wikipedia page here.
Perfect. Yeah. He's awesome.
Yeah, I think the colors on that record too, with the juxtaposition of like the blue and then that deep like red and orange inside the body with the knife, like it's very striking imagery. And it just worked, like you said, Jesse. It just works with like the lyrical content too, man. It's and that's why I think record covers are equally as important as everything else that goes into the record. I mean, it's an entire piece of art from start to finish, with the music, the lyrics, the album cover. I mean, it's from start to finish everything that you guys have been working towards since the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think he knocked it out of the park. We're very, very happy with his work then, and I think it's really stood the test of time. I'm still super happy with that choice.
So I guess one kind of final thing here to wrap it up, I guess. I mean, I know you guys did a documentary talking about when the record was 10 years old, but I mean, like I said, here we are 5 more years later, it's 15 years old. I mean, how do you guys kind of reflect and look back on this record? Because it's been such a long amount of time. I mean, you know, you guys are grown people with families and lives and everything in that amount of time. I mean, what does it feel like looking back on that record?
It's hard to look back for me at the album itself as a thing on its own, you know, because it's connected to so many experiences and such a time of my life, you know, that it's hard to even listen back to it and have a clear picture of it as just like an album or, you know, as a single work, because it's just like its roots just go into everything in my life at that time and since even, you know, so it's like it's connected to so many things. It's like it's hard to keep it in one container and think about it as an album alone, you know.
Yep.
I just look back on it, I mean, just so fondly. It was just a time where we could, like I said, just focus on our art, and a time where those guys like would come and spend weeks and months up in Canada and just brave the cold. And, you know, it was like my dream as a kid, I guess. You know, we just wake up and eat cereal and eat food and then play a bunch of heavy metal in the basement all day and then do the same thing the next day. So it was a wonderful time in my life.
So I guess I kind of lied here, I guess. You know, Jesse, now that you've kind of been brought back into the band, I mean, you know, you guys have the whole original lineup. I mean, what really like prompted the return? I mean, this is such a cool thing to have you back in the band. From, not that I don't like Carl, I think the albums of Carl are fantastic too, but I mean, having you back is extraordinary to me. I love that you're back in the band and you guys are making music. I mean, what really prompted that kind of decision and situation?
Well, I thank you very much for your kind words, sir. It was just a natural progression. There was, when we did the Malice reunion, you know, it was the first time that us five had all been together since, I mean, there's times when those guys came to Edmonton and I would sing summer with them and stuff, but it was, I would get up and sing and that would be it. There was not a lot of communication before or afterwards. So when we did the Malice reunion tour, it was the first time that we were all together, you know, and like just many ample opportunity to, you know, share dinners and break bread and have discussions and revisit, you know, a lot of the places where we had played in the past. So it was an opportunity for us to kind of heal some fractures from the past, and we definitely took that time to do that. And that film was a big part of that. You know, looking back on that now, I see that Mathew and his questioning and all the questions that we had to answer to him and within ourselves, it forced us, or it helped us to become good friends again. And then it made sense at the end of that, which was only a quick 2-week or 10-day run. Mm-hmm. At the end of that, it was just such a success, and it was just such a high and just so amazing that it seemed crazy to walk away from that. So we planned to do a couple more shows. We did Texas, and then we did one show in LA that December. So the Malice tour was initially in August. A few months later, we came back and did 2 more shows. And like I said, at that point, it just seemed so strange to just walk away. I was committed to teaching. Everybody, you know, had their own things going on. Kyle and Stuart super committed to Comeback Kid. Ryan has a family. We had a lot of other things going on, but we just I started sending riffs to Rye. We started just talking about writing music. And I think at first it wasn't even initially necessarily going to be under the Misery Signals banner. It was just, maybe let's write some songs and see what happens.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's really cool. Like, I think that, you know, what you were mentioning there, it's a cliche to say, but I mean, you know, time heals all wounds, man. And I think you guys have a bond through music, and I think it comes through in the music as well, and it's really awesome to have you guys all back together creating something again.
I agree, sir. when we started writing these new songs, it's not an easy process to write 3 Signals songs. But I know that when us 5 agree on something, I know that it's probably going to be something pretty special. So I'm happy that us 5 are again focused and moving towards the same destination.
Cool. Well, Ryan, Jesse, I seriously can't thank you guys enough for taking the time to talk about this record. I know a lot of people, it holds a strong place with them. I know a lot of my listeners definitely want to hear about this, and I hope they will also go check out the documentary that we talked about too, because it's fantastic. And you mentioned Mathew, like I've really wanted to talk to him for quite a while, because the way he did that documentary was so striking to me. I think he did such an excellent job, and just thank you guys for taking the time to do this. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Thanks for doing a cool podcast about music.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, man, it's the history. That's what matters, Cool.
I can make anything.